In its first full year of operation, Britain's modern-day slavery hotline, Unseen, received thousands of phone calls and was able to identify almost 5,000 potential victims who were being trafficked and abused and exploited in brothels, construction sites, nail salons and car washes. Unseen announced the new figures this week and said they'd received 3,710 calls from the public and victims, which resulted in around 1,500 referrals to the National Crime Agency. But these aren't the only figures. For the last few years, the government's estimated at least 13,000 people across the country being victims of forced labour or sexual exploitation. Theresa May said in 2014 that tens of thousands were being held as modern slaves in Britain. And last year, child trafficking referrals hit a record high, rising 30% in 1 year. And who knows if that even means that there were more cases. For all we know, these figures might have been this high for many years, and referrals have only just begun increasing in recent years because of new programs. The number of children being referred to the National Referral Mechanism of the government, which is a system that identifies human trafficking victims, has increased to 1,278 in 2016. The figures show that over a third of all potential victims were children under the age of 18. And the figures also showed that the most prominent country for trafficked children was my country, the UK. We beat Albania, Afghanistan and Eritrea. We've got a bigger problem than the third world, or at least a bigger recorded problem than the third world. But why are there so many slaves in Britain? Why is this happening? Well, last week I talked about how the Labour Party and our government have consistently failed to protect children. It seems like political parties aren't interested in talking about anything that's politically inconvenient, and that could certainly be part of this problem. But I think another part of this problem is poor border security and a broken immigration policy. I mean, don't get me wrong, a lot of children who are trafficked are British. In fact, I know girls who have suffered from this, just normal British girls who've been forgotten by the authorities and ignored by the police. But at the same time, a large number of these victims are thought to have arrived into the UK from northern France, likely by jumping into lorries at the Channel. So that means that once they arrive in the UK, they've got no legal rights and they're not on the system, so to speak. They're unknown and hard to trace, and the only people who really know that they're there are their traffickers. And it's this illegal status which allows for this grotesque crime to go largely unnoticed. These young trafficking victims are used for cheap or free labour in businesses up and down the country. Unseen says that almost 3/4 of all suspected victims that they uncovered were trapped in forced labour in nail salons and car washes. And Britain, in an attempt to become a world leader in ending child trafficking and modern slavery, passed the Modern Slavery Act 2015. The bill does a lot of things. So it consolidated existing slavery and trafficking offences, allows courts to place restrictions on those convicted of slavery offences, creates child trafficking advocates, creates a new statutory defence for trafficking victims, and allows for the seizing of traffickers' assets, and established an independent anti-slavery commissioner. And while that's obviously important stuff, it fails to tackle the blazingly obvious. It fails to acknowledge or tackle the fact that trafficking occurs because the methods used by illegal immigrants are used on a regular basis to bring foreign children into our country. It fails to acknowledge that our porous border with France is basically just allowing these children to be brought here in the first place. And it fails to acknowledge that should we tackle this problem at the border, we might be able to catch the perpetrators of this wicked crime and save the young children who are being brought here. So with this week's news that some 3 years since the passing of the Modern Slavery Act, we're still dealing with thousands of reports of modern slavery in the UK, I'm perturbed. The Act doesn't tackle the problem as well as it should. And the recording of data from the National Referral Mechanism has also been criticised. So a report by the Work and Pensions Committee claimed that thousands of victims haven't come forward, and those who have done have chose just not to give evidence against their enslavers, and that's because of an insufficient level of support. I know I'm usually the guy who comes on camera to complain about immigration and focusing on citizens rather than non-citizens, but when we're faced with such a widespread atrocity in our own country, regardless of who the kids are, then I think it's important to provide the support they need. You know, they need to be able to come forward and name their enslavers. These young slavery victims should be taken care of while we find out who's committing these crimes and just round up the scum that's in charge of these operations. By taking the problem seriously, providing the necessary support, tackling problems at the border and being proactive, then Britain can turn this around. But like with so much else, our government seems far more interested in just patching over the problem for now and dealing with issues that they know won't land them in any controversy. So after this week's news that modern day slavery is as bad as ever in England, I'm sure Corbyn's going to get back to promoting his free bus travel programme. And Theresa May will, carry on stumbling around Westminster in her kitten heels, bumping into various controversies along the way. So why do we have so many slaves in Britain? Well, it's because we lack the political will to solve it. Watch me and the rest of Rebel on our brand new Rebel app, which is available now on the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store.